It seems Elizabeth also had some pretty strong views on independence and freedom, maybe also fueled by this Hellenic connection.
That's a really important angle. The common idea of Elizabeth being politically indifferent. Her own writings really challenge that.
Her poems.
Her poems show this deep dislike for absolutism, for monarchy itself. And interestingly, she really admired Napoleon Bonaparte.
Napoleon.
Yeah.
Seriously, given her position.
Yeah, she kept a bust of him in the Achillean, even made a special trip to visit his birthplace in Corsica.
Why Napoleon? What was the appeal? Was it just because he shook things up?
Well, partly maybe. Her favorite poet, Heine, was a big Napoleon fan, so that likely played a part.
Okay.
But beyond that, Napoleon was seen by many as this figure who just blew up the old order of European monarchies, a revolutionary force championing liberty, self-determination, at least early on.
Right. Disrupting the system she felt trapped in.
Exactly. That must have resonated with her own intense desire for freedom from the rigid Habsburg court.
So she saw him as a kind of liberator, challenging the status quo she hated.
Seems likely. And her engagement with the Greek War of Independence, specifically through her favorite romantic poets, is also very telling.
Like Shelley and Byron.
Yes. She knew Percy Shelley's Hellas really well.
Oh, yeah.
It's this powerful call for Greek freedom and equality, ideals that clearly clicked with her.
And Byron. He didn't just write about it, he went there.
Right. He actively fought in the war and tragically died in Mesolongi fighting for Greek independence. A huge romantic gesture.
And Elizabeth actually followed his footsteps, didn't she?
She did. In 1888, she took this pretty demanding trip to Atolier, Arcania, tracing Byron's path, visiting the house where he died, his monument.
Wow.
And she put up a statue of Byron in the Achillean's Park, a permanent tribute to his dedication to Greek freedom.
So real admiration there. And it extended to modern Greek figures, too.
Yes, like Ioannis Kapodistrias, the first prime minister of modern Greece. She visited his graves and his villa in Corfu, apparently expressed real sympathy for his assassination and the immense challenges he faced trying to build an independent Greek state.
It seems she was consistently drawn to these figures who fought for or represented self-determination.
It really paints a picture of a woman with her own clear political sympathies, even if she couldn't exactly shout them from the rooftops in Vienna.
Okay, let's shift again to the aesthetic side. Her famous focus on beauty seems very tied up with her love for Greece.
Absolutely linked. Elizabeth's legendary beauty, her almost obsessive pursuit of preserving it, that's well known. It seems physical passion might have played a, let's say, limited role in her life. Instead, she surrounded herself with art, with objects that fit her very strong aesthetic ideals. And Greece was the perfect source for that.
Like the Hermes statue, the one outside the Hermes villa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That nude statue of Hermes, messenger of the gods,
Yeah.
it perfectly captured her ideals of grace, youth, classical beauty.
And this aesthetic carried over to the Achillean.
Completely. From the sculpture she chose for the park to even the paintings of Greek athletes in the gymnasium at the Hermes Villa, where she did her famously rigorous exercises.
So it wasn't just grand scenery, it was the idealized human form, that classical athletic ideal, too.
Yes, of a total immersion in that classical aesthetic. And she found beauty in surprising places, too, right?
Like that rundown estate.
Yeah. She was apparently enchanted by this somewhat dilapidated estate in Corfu that belonged to the philosopher Petros Vrelis Arminas.
Despite its condition.
Yes, she saw its potential, its inherent beauty, and bought it as a personal retreat. She envisioned it as her own Olymp, a private sanctuary.
Wow. And the Achillean itself, obviously the biggest project.
Huge cost. Officially opened in 1891. Countess Irma Stere, her last lady-in-waiting, described it so poignantly as a refuge for a great wounded soul.
That really captures its personal meaning for her, more than just a palace.
Oh, much more. A deeply personal sanctuary.
Yeah.
And there are even hints she started to sort of identify as Greek.
Really? How so?
Well, there are accounts of her referring to herself as Greek when traveling abroad. And apparently, she sometimes addressed Franz Joseph in letters, using the Greek word for majesty, megaleiotis.
Megaliotis. Interesting.
Yeah. And she obsessed over the Achillean's interior's Pompeian style. Drew direct inspiration from her travels to archaeological sites.
Like where?
Mycenae, Tiryns, Schliemann's Digs, the Acropolis Pompeii, Herculaneum. She visited them all.
She really did her homework.
She even wrote to Wilhelm Dorpfeld, the famous archaeologist who worked with Schliemann, to get photos of a Hermes sculpture from Olympia to make sure her copy was accurate.
That level of detail, it shows real commitment to her Hellenic ideal.
It really does. And the art inside the Achillean, the big dying Achilles, statues of the nine muses, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Adonis, Vestal, Centaurus, it all reflects her specific taste, her immersion in Greek myth and culture.
But her passion for it doesn't last forever.
Interestingly, no. Her interest in the Achillean seemed to fade eventually. She told Christomanos, "Our dreams are always more beautiful when we do not realize them."
That's quite melancholic.
It is. By the time she died, she'd actually started moving artworks out of the palace. Maybe the unstable politics in Greece played a role, or maybe, just maybe, the dream itself had sort of run its course for her.
A reminder that even deep passions can shift over time. Poignant. Okay, let's get into a very personal aspect. Her relationships with her Greek confidants.
Yes, this is where we see a level of intellectual engagement with Greece, the language, the culture, that was arguably deeper than any other European royal on the Greek throne.
How did that start?
Around 1888, she started formal lessons in both ancient and modern Greek. In Corfu, with a tutor named Ioannis Romanos.
Formal lessons.
Yes, but she also had this unique method. She practiced Greek during her long walks, and even while having her famously long hair dressed every day.
Multitasking. Who helped with that?
A man named Nikos Thermogenes facilitated that, making the most of every minute. And in the last decade of her life, she gathered this circle of about 10 young Greek men from prominent families. They acted as her readers during her travels.
Readers. What did that involve?
They'd read aloud to her, converse with her, help her with translations, often intellectuals. Some had studied abroad. Names like Thermogenes again, the Christomanos brothers, Constantine Manos.
And how was this viewed back in Vienna?
Predictably, with suspicion. You can imagine the court gossip about the Empress and her young Greek companions.
Whispers and speculation.
Absolutely. And psychologically, her preference for these young male readers, especially after Rudolph's suicide, it's significant, isn't it?
It suggests maybe a longing for that intellectual connection she'd hoped for with her son.
Possibly. A search for intellectual companionship, personal connection, maybe replacing what was lost.
Interesting. And she had preferences in the language itself.
Yes. She clearly preferred the demotic, the common spoken Greek over the more formal, scholarly Katharevousa that the elite favored.
Why was that?
She apparently told one reader she abhorred pretense in thought, writing, or anything else.
So she wanted authenticity.
Exactly. Her preference for the everyday language of farmers, fishermen, shepherds. It shows this openness, a real connection to ordinary people. It's a trait she shared with her father, Duke Max, and reportedly with Rudolph, too.
It really speaks to that desire for something genuine, rejecting formality.
Precisely. And these reading sessions weren't lightweight stuff.
What were they reading and translating?
Oh, major works. Shakespeare, Heine, Ibsen, Tolstoy, Schopenhauer, plus contemporary Greek poets.
Serious literature and philosophy.
Definitely. And her most famous reader, Constantine Christomanos, he even secretly arranged for her Greek translation of German novella, Paul Heise's Die Einsamen, to be printed.
Secretly?
Yes, under the pseudonym Gloriette. That book, Limorhas in Greek, is actually preserved now at the Benaki Museum in Athens.
Wow, a tangible piece of that collaboration. Incredible history. So how was this deep connection, this Basilisa living among them sometimes, actually perceived in Greece?
It's fascinating how she was seen by the people she admired so much.
She made quite a few trips, didn't she?
15 separate trips to Greece. Mostly as a private individual trying to be anonymous, she even visited Athens incognito twice.
Did she manage to stay incognito?
Not always. Her arrival in Piraeus often drew crowds. News of her presence would sometimes leak into the Greek papers.
But in Corfu, it was different.
Yes, on Corfu, the locals quickly got used to her. They respectfully called her Basilisa Queen, but mostly they respected her wish for privacy.
It sounds like they understood her need for a more normal existence there.
I think they did. During her solitary walks exploring the landscapes, she found this connection with ordinary Greeks that was just impossible back in Vienna.
And Christomanos' diaries are key here.
Invaluable. His detailed entries give us these amazing glimpses of his and other villagers' interactions with the Empress. His memoirs later became incredibly popular in Greece and beyond. Really shaped how people saw her.
So his writing really defined her image for many, provided a more human perspective.
Immensely. Far more intimate than the official court view. And the people of Corfu generally held her in very high regard.
Because of her kindness.
Yes, she was known for acts of generosity.
Oh.
She paid for a needed well in the village of Gestori, apparently intervened in a legal dispute for 2 local women.
Small things, but meaningful.
Exactly. And as a sign of their appreciation, Gasturi actually made her an honorary citizen.
That's lovely.
And when she was assassinated in 1898, the reaction from her Greek readers was profound.
How so?
They published these heartfelt obituaries and memoirs. Their accounts presented a much more positive, more nuanced picture of her than you often found from the Viennese aristocracy or media, who could be quite critical.
So they helped create a different understanding of her.
Absolutely. They played a huge role in shaping a new, more sympathetic, and probably more accurate understanding of her personality. It really highlights how genuine that connection to Greece and its people truly was.
It really does sound like it was a reciprocal relationship, valued on both sides. Well, this has been a genuinely enriching deep dive. Amazing stuff.
It really has. And what stands out most, I think, is just how profound and, well, multifaceted the significance of Greece was for her, especially in those last decades.
Exactly. We wanted to explore her Philhellenism in the context of her whole personal journey, and I feel we've definitely uncovered a much richer, more complex picture than the standard narrative.
By looking at these less common sources, the poems, the readers' accounts.
We see Elizabeth not just as this distant empress, but as a deeply human person, someone for whom Greece offered what? Solace, inspiration, a sense of belonging, maybe.
Which leads us to maybe a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah.
Think about how Elizabeth's really intense, deeply personal connection to a culture so different from her own wasn't just an escape.
Right. Not just running away from court life.
But perhaps it gave her a fundamental framework for understanding her own identity, her own desires, in a world that often felt, well, profoundly alien to her.
That's a great point. What can we maybe learn from her embrace of the unfamiliar in our own search for meaning, for a sense of place in the world today?
Something to ponder.